How do you conduct or write a literature review? We'll start with Jessica, we'll go to Raina, and then Faith will wrap it up for us because she is in this business. PhD researcher. So, Jessica, let's start with you.
Thank you, Same. And based on kind of what my topic ended up being, I didn't necessarily have to do a literature review. I looked a lot about cases and different commentaries, but that still in part does go towards literature review. My topic was a bit more contemporary, but my main advice about a literature review is it's part of your research process. So when you're looking at different sources, it's really important that you categorize those sources into what is that author saying as their position, and that could be a negative affirmation or argument to what you're saying. It could be neutral, or it could be something that supports your argument. The other thing to look at when you're doing a literature review, in addition to that, is putting them into chronological order and looking at when those sources came out, because that gives you a sense of saying, okay, is there a lot of commentary that's very old on this topic? Or is there a lot of commentary that's very new? So it gives you a sense of how the topic's developed and how you can use that. Because if you're using something that's a bit older in your literature review or a commentator or another fellow scholar, you want to generally, if you're citing something from, say, 1992, when there's something that's more contemporary or that source is outdated, you want to understand why you're sort of citing that particular person. So I think my advice with literature review, I didn't have to do it. I looked at a lot of different blogs and people's comments, which was partially, but mine was contemporary. But my advice is, as you're researching, do this categorical exercise for yourself of chronological and then different positions. Because if you have to do a literature review in a comparison of your topic, you already have a better sense of where the literature falls, and you can better make your argument to say, well, this is my position and this is others who have agreed with this, but nevertheless, this is the other side. And it shows that you're able to make a more in-depth argument and analysis of why whatever you're arguing or putting into your dissertation or thesis is the right position, because that's essentially what you're trying to say when you're doing your writing. So that's my advice on literature review. So I'll turn it over to Raina. She has also other thoughts on that.
Thank you, Jessica. I do agree. I think the points that she mentioned are very relevant. I think to me, when I started off with academic writing, like I said, so literature review is not always something that is mandatory. Your work, it depends on the kind of work that you do and the kind of topics that you choose. But I feel like before anyone starts with literature review, it's very important to understand what is the ultimate aim of literature review. And according to my understanding, it is to basically understand what kind of resources and current research is already being done on a point of question that you are investigating further into. So if you have a question that you're investigating in your academic piece of writing, it's important to see if there's already a lot of research on that, what is the standing of that current research, and how does it impact whatever investigation or research that you are going to do further into that. So take that into consideration when you're going through resources or any form of literature related to your research. But I think in terms of actually writing the literature review, how I personally do it is that it does follow very much the similar format to your academic piece of writing. So a good literature review usually does start with an introduction, it has a body, and then it ends with a conclusion. And what the aim of that to do is basically to introduce what kind of literature you have identified on the current piece of academic writing or topic that you're writing. And then, like Jessica said, you need to categorize them, make sure that you're putting it all in a chronological order, and then individually identify what is the outcome of the literature that is relating to your piece of work. So make sure that you evaluate each piece of literature that has a significant contribution to your area of research. If there is any particular piece of literature that is providing a lot of statistics or facts or figures, I think it's very important and pertinent to put that into consideration in your own literature review. And in the end, your conclusion, I think, needs to evaluate, is there enough literature that is there in your piece's area of research? Do you feel like there can be more of that? Is it influencing the kind of research that you're doing? And all of this needs to come in a very compact form in your literature review. Your literature review in the end needs to be a very thorough investigation of what kind of information you can find on your current topic of research and how that has a bearing on whatever it is that you are presenting in terms of your own piece of academic writing. So I think these things are definitely important to keep in mind while we do a literature review, for sure.
Wow, I'm definitely learning from this session. Faith, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jessica and Raina. Just jumping off on what they've said. Yes, I think for literature review, I'd say there are two styles depending on what field you're in. I think in law, we really don't usually have a chapter on literature review, but people in maybe social sciences tend to have a particular chapter on literature review. And so I don't know if there are people in that area, so I'll start off with that area, just to say that in that kind of area, it's looking at basically what Jessica said, that you're reviewing all of the literature and trying to review them in a chronological manner, that each literature is leading to another literature, each point in the literature is kind of leading to another point in the literature. And I think a way to do literature review is usually to first read all of the literature, because that's the way you can actually do a chronological or a systematic literature review. If you start off with, I finished writing this article and then I'm going to start researching on each point after writing. So you find an article and then you write your review on that article, and then you decide to find another article. I think the best way is download all of your materials, read all of your materials, make notes on all of your materials, and then try to group those materials. These are the materials supporting this particular view. These are the materials supporting this particular view. These are materials that are similar in terms of the arguments. Because what that also helps you with is to review like 5 materials together. You can say A, B, C, said this, because they're basically saying the same thing. So there is no point having separate paragraphs, especially if there is no point of deviation, which sometimes you find. So, and just reviewing and going back to what Raina said, one of the things you're looking for by doing a literature review is trying to highlight what the gap is in the literature. Trying to say, this is the state of the literature, this is what has been done, this is the gap, this is why what I'm doing differs from what has been done. So from a good literature review, we should be able to see why you need to do your research, because you're trying to make a case for why your research is necessary. That yes, these are the literature in this area, and this is why my research is necessary. This is the gap my research is trying to fill in this area. And also from a good literature review, we should also be able to see the previous scholars that are influencing your thoughts. So we should be able to say, this is the direction you are towing. These are the line of authors that you are towing their own perspective. So from a good literature review, we should also be able to see that. And going to a legal literature review, it's kind of similar. It's just that most times you don't have a particular chapter saying this is literature review, but in writing, you're engaging with the literature. And in your engagement with the literature, we're saying what your opinion is, your area of disagreements, your area of agreements. We're saying how you are gradually trying to distill what the gap is in the literature, and how you're gradually showing which authors you agree with and which authors you disagree with, and the why. And from reviewing people's work, and also like gradually trying to master the art of literature review, what I usually notice sometimes is in a literature review, we should always say why. So sometimes people just say, oh, this person has said this and this, but I don't agree with them. That's not a good literature review. The next thing is, why don't you agree with them? Because you shouldn't just say, oh, I don't agree, I don't think this is good. You should be able to show why. And also from a good literature review should show respect for other authors. Sometimes you read some people's work and you just see the way they kind of disrespect other people and say, oh, this is rubbish, this is... No, I think from a good literature review, you should show respect for your colleagues and also try to be critical, but not downgrading what somebody else has said. You should be able to disagree respectfully with the literature you're reviewing. I hope that answers the question.
It did not just answer, it addressed the issues, the pertinent issues. Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer, Faith. Thank you so much. Now, flowing from what you all have said about literature review, let's now bring it into the main body of the work. When I was doing my undergrad, when I wrote my undergraduate thesis, yes, I did a dissertation, but I didn't really hear critical thinking. My lecturers did not really ring it in my ear, maybe because it felt like it was undergrad. Maybe you don't really have enough grounds to probably critically analyze content or academic writing. But from day one of my postgraduate degree, I kept on hearing critical thinking and writing. Now, it has a lot of things, just like Faith has said with that literature review. In law, what you are writing, we don't have a separate section, but in writing, you are engaging with the literature, you are agreeing or disagreeing, varying, and making your inputs. So, my question here is, how do you differentiate between a descriptive writing and a critical thinking? We will start with Jessica.
Oh, I think that this is a very big trap that a lot of people fall into when they're writing, it's very easy to write something that's descriptive, but not really being critical. And I think this is where all the tips that Faith and Raina just mentioned come into play. If you organize your research as if you're doing a literature review, even if it's not required, this helps you give you some idea of what your position is. So with descriptive writing, I'll give you an example. Say there was a recent world event, or in law, there was a recent case decision that came out describing what the court decided or what happened in that event. So we'll take the COP26 meeting. If you write kind of about what happened at that meeting, who attended, what was said, etc., that's all descriptive. Whereas critical thinking is where, and I know we mentioned this earlier, finding your voice. So it's about putting your own argument and analysis on a particular topic. So that could be that you support a current trend that's happening in what you're writing about. It could be that you disagree. It could be that you propose solutions to a problem that you've identified that has come up in your particular field. You can do a comparison. And this is, I think, one area I want to talk about a little bit, because this is where it gets tricky, where you fall into the trap of descriptive and missing out on critical. Doing a comparative research paper, dissertation, thesis is completely fine and can still be critical writing. But what's really important is when you're doing that comparison is that you're not just describing the differences and similarities between whatever you're comparing. You have to take a position on what that comparison is and why it's relevant for whatever you're talking about. So that's something my pro tip I tell you to keep in mind, that if you're doing a comparison between things, just don't fall into the trap of describing the comparisons. Explain why that comparison and why you're doing that comparison, because your thought process in picking different jurisdictions, different eras of history, and exactly what Milos mentioned earlier, comparing the contemporary era with the Greek era and historical, showing those similarities and explaining how things trend and why it's relevant for that topic, that's a great example of where you're doing a comparison, but you're putting a critical thinking spin on it. So that would be my tips. I'm sure there's lots more to put, but those would be kind of how I would say descriptive versus critical thinking and how to make sure you do that in your writing.
Okay, Raina, can you give us your own tips? Thank you so much, Jessica. That is very practical.
Thank you. I think I 100% agree with Jessica. It is very easy to fall into the trap of, going ahead and describing something instead of actually putting your voice into it. And I think that is, when you're trying to do a critical piece of writing, it's very, very important to be well informed. So I feel like whenever you're doing a piece of critical analysis, it's always very important that whatever part leads up to that is filled with information about how you are reaching the conclusion that you are. But at the same time, it should lead again to some form of an opinion that you have. A lot of people, I feel, when they do critical analysis, it's not always enough to just put your opinion out there. You go ahead and you describe any particular event or any particular case, and you say, the respondents argued so and so, the claimants argued in so and so manner, and then this is what the judge decided, and I feel like I disagreed. And that will not qualify as a piece of critical writing, because in terms of critical writing, it's very important that your own analysis goes into it. Just providing your opinion without having something to back it up, again, does not qualify as critical analysis. It's very important that when you are providing your opinion about a particular piece of fact, opinion, or whatever it is, it's always backed up with your own resources, with your own research, and that research does not have to necessarily be coming from the research of the two other parties who may be fighting that particular case. It can come from another piece of literature. It can come from another world event that is happening at the same time, or something that has a bearing on whatever opinion you have. But it's very, very important that you methodically describe how you reach that opinion and whether you agree or disagree. And sometimes I feel, it can be, even in terms of critical thinking or writing, there can be multiple methods to do that. It doesn't always have to be that you have to agree or disagree with a certain point of law, say, that comes in our judgment. Sometimes it can be a really gray area, and it is okay to weigh both options. If there's a piece of information and you can't decide whether you should be going for or against, but if you put forth your arguments both for and against that piece of information, and you provide equal backing in terms of resources for that, that is still critical analysis. Because what you're eventually doing, I think, is providing a platform, a well-informed platform for your reader to evaluate whatever is happening and coming to a conclusion by themselves. And I think that is the ultimate aim of critical analysis, is that you provide your reader with all the resources to come to a very informed conclusion by themselves, or you do it for them and you let them decide for themselves if it's a good conclusion or not. And that is what differentiates critical analysis from descriptive writing. Because, like Jessica said, in descriptive writing, you provide all the information as it happened. And it's very much like, how you would see maybe a media outlet describe a particular piece of news. When journalists go and they take this piece of information, they're giving you the information that happened. This delegate said so-and-so, or this party argued in so-and-so manner, and this is what the outcome of the judgment was. But they're not really providing you any sort of information about whether they think it's right, or whether they think it's wrong, or how they're reaching the conclusion. And that just merely stays descriptive. So in any piece of academic writing, I feel like if you're trying to really contribute to whatever field it is that you're researching in or writing in, it's very important that you really give a thought as to what you feel is happening over here, and if it's right, if it's wrong, how it can be maybe further delved into, and all of that needs to go into your academic piece of writing to make it a good piece of academic writing that critically analyzes whatever it is that you're doing.
Very comprehensive. Thank you so much. I believe that we've been able to understand what that means. Descriptive writing, you are saying what is. what is. This is what it is. This is what this person said. This is what that person said. Critical thinking, you're saying, and so what? This person said this, so this person said that. How important is what that person has said? How has it affected things? Or how can you vary from what the person has said? If that person has made a recommendation, how good is that? What do you think? How strong do you think that recommendation is? Is it good enough? Is it going to affect A or is it going to affect B? What are the advantages and disadvantages of this person's position? Why do you agree with A and not agree with B? Yes, I agree with A, but I don't agree with his analysis. I agree with his conclusion, but I don't agree with his analysis. You can still agree and disagree at the same time. And I think what Rainer has said is, at the end of the day, you don't always have to answer a question. Like, you don't always have to give a solution, maybe A or B. You don't always have to say this thing is this or this thing is that. You can as well highlight a gray area, places that, there are no answers, and leave it to your audience to decide. But the important thing is you lay all the cards on the table. Don't come out writing an essay that, okay, I want to promote the view that COVID-19 has promoted access to justice, and all your materials are those resources that are supporting your point. What about the resources that are, arguing the other way? And you need to bring them in and also state whether you agree with them or not. And when writing, don't be biased, okay? It's not an emotional thing. You have to be very logical. Are they making the right points? Even if the person differs from the other authors that you agree with, are they making a reasonable point? Is it logical? If it's logical, of course, you bring it in and you just highlight the challenges or just make it a wholesome document. When somebody reads the document, let them see the good, the bad, the ugly in the situation. I think that is what critical thinking is. I'm going to move to Akintunde because Faith had given us a lot of highlights on literature review and the fact that I think the academic writing industry, or should I say academic writing, is gradually moving from that giving a literature review a specific chapter to incorporating it from the beginning of your work to the end. I think I actually really enjoy that because it helps you cover, address all the issues you have to address while also, as you progress with your writing. Now, I want to ask Akintunde, which is the most important part of your academic writing? Academic writing has a structure, abstract, introduction, the main body, the conclusion, recommendations. Now, there is, when anybody takes your work, okay, they first read the abstract, they go to the introduction, and likely they will go to the conclusion before they start reading the main body. I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that. If you want to review a document, you read the abstract, you probably read the introduction and the conclusion before you sit down to really analyze. What would you say is the most important part of an academic writing? And if no part is better than the other, let us know and give us a critical thinking or critical analysis there. Why do you think so? So whatever answer you're giving us, you have to give us a reason. Akintunde, are you with us?